Okay, everybody. So once again, just to review from your general orientation, NICE serves three types of clients generally, and that also applies to our youth education program. We serve refugees, which are people who are recognized in the international landscape as being persecuted or needing to leave their home because of a fear of persecution. And those refugees have to go through the UN's program and be resettled to come into the United States. We also serve asylees who might cross a border and request temporary sanctuary from the country they are crossing into. And we also serve immigrants who are newly arrived to the US and need support in the school. Just so you all know, we do have several updates to our team here at NICE that I want to go over with you all before we get too far into the training. Becca Hoopy, Huppy, who helped to onboard most of you all during our volunteer orientation, has actually left the agency, but we've already secured a new volunteer coordinator, and her name is Eden Norris. She was actually an intern with us, so she will be kind of helping get feedback from you all once you're placed with your families. And again, support just making sure everybody knows where they're at in their background check process. But we'll talk a little bit more today about who's going to be supervising you in your volunteer experience and what that'll look like. So to give you an even closer and clearer picture, we're going to talk about a student profile for mentorship specifically. So who are we aiming to serve with this particular program? Well, normally we have two high school programs. One is called SIFE, which stands for Students with Interrupted Formal Education. These are not necessarily refugee students. They could be from any immigrant population, but they have wide gaps in their schooling because of transience. So in going from place to place or having a loose school structure in their home country, they've missed out on a lot of the necessary elements to participate with their native-born peers. And so rather than put them in an English program, we actually put them into programs that are even more remediatory because of the strong needs of those students. They're in SIFE at all sorts of levels. We actually in Nashville have elementary school SIFE classes. That is not a typical thing to do just because the gap is not as pronounced at elementary. But when you look at the gaps across all grade levels, high school is the most impacted by large gaps because these are people who are coming in with wide skill deficiencies. They do not have the literacy skills to participate in formal education and require a lot of catch up compared to our other students. So we put a lot of our energy into the SIFE high school students. Once they're in SIFE for a year, if they're still struggling enough to need mediation and some kind of additional support system, they'll go into an RAEL program, which just stands for Recently Arrived English Learners. It's people who still have cultural barriers to being able to participate in US-based schooling. So the students that we serve are predominantly from Glencliff High School and John Overton High School and their respective SIFE and RAEL services. Normally, we're able to serve those students in person because we actually go into their classroom and help their teachers navigate things like 60 kids who don't know how to speak English, right? The other intended audience for this particular program are refugees and asylees who have been in the country for less than 5 years. So these are people who come in and qualify for support through the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And so we have a program called Preferred Clients, PC, which is just a department, it's the State Department program. And so basically for our families who are PC clients, we want to serve their children. Those kids often are not in a SIFE or ESL program any longer because they've been in the country for a couple of years, but they still have huge gaps, especially when it comes to technology, resource access, those sort of things. So we're going to try to target that audience as well. And then the last group of students that we're going to recruit for this program are the children of our adult education clients. So we get adult ed students from all kinds of populations. We have a higher percentage of immigrants in that program compared to our other programs, which are predominantly refugee based. And so we have, I would say, unique language needs in that program. We have clients from different kinds of backgrounds. So there's more Vietnamese and Burmese clients, for example, Somali clients that are in that category. And so what we've been realizing is that a lot of our AE clients are raising their hands saying, hey, this ESL class is great for me, but my kid is not able to participate in school and I'm very concerned about that. Can you help us? And so we're also going to try to capture that audience with this form of service. Just to give you an idea of most of our students that you'll be working with, they are in general low literacy, meaning if they know their own language from their home country, they may not be literate in that language. So it's often the case that they can speak or listen and know how to write a little bit, but have pretty big gaps in their literacy, even in their native language, because they, again, are missing formal education. So they might not be able to read or write in their own language. They're very low literacy in English. And Lydia will tell you, because she's had the job before, we're talking about middle school and high school students that are learning the alphabet. They're learning how to encode words and decode words, and they're learning how to really read fluently out loud. So reading simple sentences like the fire truck went by, just learning how to pace that sentence and where to pause and how to pronounce the words. All of that's still going on with these students, even though they're in high school. So it's a really big gap. Um, a lot of our families, if not all of our families, are low income. We recently did a project with Metro Housing Authority, and all of the students who we enrolled for that program were below 30% average median income, which means they're making extremely low income, and they're considered well below the poverty level. Our students, as I've kind of alluded to already, are also basic skills deficient. That means they haven't had every math class that their peers would have, where they don't have a geography or social studies background at all. And so when you put them into a context of reading about 18th century Japan, for example, which was an assignment one of our students got from Margaret Allen in their psych program last year, it's really hard to have the context and background knowledge to complete those assignments. And that's where tutoring becomes a huge need for those students. Another kind of common thing that you will find with our audience here, our clients, is that there are cultural barriers. So they're coming from environments where schooling is a-traditional. Can you guys hear me okay? Looks like one person said they lost audio. Okay, great. So Kimberly, that might be you. If you want to restart and come back in, let me put that. Actually, Lydia, do you mind messaging her just so she knows that most of us are able to hear? Okay. Great. So what that means is that for a lot of our clients, for a lot of these youth students, they have no context for US-based schooling and have significant cultural barriers. Everything is new to them, whether it's the post office or the library or what a school bus looks like, it's all new. And so there's a huge culture shock there that has to have some navigation and wayfinding. If they are a refugee coming out of camp, school happens outside up until high school for most of those camps, which means if it rains, school is closed, which you'll notice that a lot of our students will not participate in in-person services when the weather's bad because they're used to rainy weather, meaning school is canceled. So there's all sorts of ways that kind of affects US-based schooling. Schooling in a lot of the countries our refugee clients come from is not mandatory, at least not until a certain grade level. And by high school, 33% of your kids are dropped out already because they're either working or helping out in the household or babysitting, for example. And so there's just a lot of rules when it comes to US-based schooling. Truancy is a rule that is very new to a lot of our families and has to be navigated. Um, how to behave in the lunchroom. You know, those kinds of things, they seem common sense to us, but again, it's all new to our clients. And I'll tell you guys a little funny story. We had an issue with one of our property complexes, apartment complexes that we partner with last year, because one of our refugee children hopped on a bike and rode off with it. Well, you know, back in camp, everything is communal property. If there's a bike, it's everybody's bike. They didn't understand that that was someone's personal property. And we actually got a call from the apartment complex complaining about the family. And those things are just really difficult to navigate because it's not the fault of the, 5 or 6 year old who's riding the bike, that they don't have a context for understanding how someone might perceive that as theft. So all sorts of fun things to consider. And then the last thing that's really common to all of our clients right now is that they've been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So 37211, which is the zip code for our office complex, and a majority of our clients, has been hardest hit by the pandemic. The parents of these children are working in places like Tyson and FedEx, which have not shut down during the pandemic. So they're still considered essential workers. They're in environments where there's a high risk for outbreak. And then they're living in places like apartment complexes. And guys, I've been through Stonebrook, I've been through Whispering Oaks, I've been through Highlands during this pandemic, which are some of our 3 highest volume apartment complexes for our client base. Nobody's masked up. They're all outside hanging out around the grill or the stoop or whatever. And this thing is spreading like wildfire. We had a new arrival family who was here for less than a month, and every single person in the case got the virus. And so it's just happening a lot among this community, and we have to be mindful of that. Now, we are really responsive to that. We're still doing home visits with these clients, and we're still looking for people who are willing to go to the homes of our families and meet with them. To do that, we're providing all of our staff and volunteers with face shields and face masks and gloves. We're also requiring that the family also wear face masks that are provided by the agency. There's all kinds of measures that we're trying to take, but the reality of the situation is the families don't need help that we can necessarily provide virtually. They need some supports that have to be provided in person. And just to give you guys an example, we've had 3 different clients over the last week who still haven't been able to figure out how to turn their computer on. And it's hard to do that, obviously, over the phone. You really have to be in person with them. So I understand that many of you are limited in the capacity to serve by going to a home and meeting with a family. But if you're in a rare position where you feel comfortable doing that and you have the availability, please let me know, because we are going to try to assemble a unique team of volunteers to be in the homes on a semi-regular basis, just to help with some of those more difficult aspects of wayfinding and more difficult aspects of service delivery. And we'll talk a little bit about that later in this training. But there you go. That is who we are hoping to serve. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in here to the structure of this program. I do not have a picture of Halima yet, but there are really 3 full-time people that will be available to you in this program, myself being one. Halima Ngabiri was actually just hired and starts next week. She is a Rwandan asylee and will be assistant managing the department. We're really excited to have her on board. She does speak a number of different languages and has lots of great case management experience, and experience particularly with the communities that we serve. And Hana Mwanza is going to be coordinating you all as mentors. So she's moved into a new full-time role as mentorship coordinator, and her first assignment will be matching you all with families and providing you with further resources to help you serve those families appropriately. And she is actually Nigerian and speaks a few different languages, but not any of the ones our clients would know. The mentorship program is really going to be executed in two aspects. So again, if you're a person who's willing to go into apartment complexes, meet with families, and be on the ground, we're looking for what I'm calling resource officers, people to step in and help navigate SNAP applications for food stamps, or help with an uninsurance application, support the family in contacting 10 Care. There's all sorts of things that have to happen with those basic critical needs. That's not what we're going to cover in today's training. We're going to talk a little bit about how all of you can support the basic needs of our clients. But if you're interested in learning more about becoming a resource officer, let me know, because you can certainly do both in the same amount of time it would take you to do one or the other. You would just spend a little bit more of your time on critical needs. What we're going to talk about today is how we meet the academic and social and emotional needs of our clients in virtual space. So here again are some of those positions, and I just want to go through how each one of them is designed to support you through this process, so you know who to contact about what and who you might expect to see as you're executing your work. So our volunteer coordinator, Eden, is responsible for general recruitment and training. So she's the one who responds to your applications or reaches out to an agency you might be a part of to get your foot in the door with us as an agency. And she's also the one who's responsible for general orientation and trainings like this one. Obviously, we're onboarding that person, but they will have a real responsibility to do quarterly trainings that you all can be invited to, just to increase your skills and learn new things about serving clients as best as possible. She's also going to be hosting volunteer engagement events. We haven't finalized any of those, but we have some really great ideas coming up that will just give you all as volunteers the opportunity to create a sense of community among yourselves and see each other as a network for support. And hopefully keep you coming back to NICE for a long, long time. Because we definitely know that each one of you has such a strong impact that you can provide for our families. The other thing that the coordinator is going to be responsible for is providing feedback, or sorry, getting feedback from you all on your experience. So on a regular basis, you might receive some survey information or a phone call from the volunteer coordinator just saying, hey, it's been 3 or 4 weeks. How's your experience going? Just that basic check-in, or you might get a Google form that asks you some questions about how you felt your training went, how you feel like your placement's going, those sort of things. The volunteer coordinator is responsible for showing you how to use your Track It Forward account. We went over that a little bit during general orientation. If you have questions about that, please make sure to reach out to Eden. I'll provide her contact information to all of you. But it's going to be the mentorship coordinator that will poke you, for example, to actually submit your hours, okay? So they're the person who will be supervising your experience. They're going to provide you with ongoing guidance. So you might receive weekly initiatives that you could do in your mentorship meetings. They're going to provide you, like I said, with reminders about submitting your hours. And they're going to walk you through and review things we're calling mentor reports. These are just short little feedback forms that you're going to provide each week that you meet with a client so that we know what's happening with that client, and if any referrals are necessary to that family, that they can be made appropriately. The mentorship coordinator is also going to be the one matching you to a family and scheduling your visits. The assistant manager position is actually responsible for facilitating curriculum. So there may be an opportunity to provide you all with lessons that you go over with your mentees, or suggestions for games you could play together, different kinds of ways to connect to the families. They're also going to be evaluating the program's success. So you might see them come into a mentorship opportunity, like meet you in a Zoom session to see how your interaction's going with your family, just to kind of evaluate the program, not evaluate you as a volunteer, if that makes sense. That just helps us monitor our progress towards goals that we have for this program. And then they're also going to be working for me a little bit, collecting data. So they may ask you how many minutes you met with your mentee this month, or get your opinion on their improvement in specific content areas like math or science. So collecting data that will help support our program outcomes. And then I, of course, supervise the whole kit and caboodle, which is a great thing to be able to do. I'm also responsible for managing strategic partnerships. The reason that I'm bringing that up now is if you're a member of a group like a faith-based community or recreational group that would be interested in volunteering as an entire group, you can let me know and I will reach out to that group and give them an idea of what a pipeline to become a mentor for an entire agency might look like. I'm also responsible for managing grants and reporting program outcomes to our funders. So you may hear from me a little bit around grant writing time, just to make sure that we have student success stories, for example. So if something's going well with one of your students and you want to show it off, we might put that into a grant. Before we move forward, are there any questions that you guys have about the structure of our department and who's on board? Great. So I love this picture. This is Ozka and Oyela, two refugee students who are twins, by the way, at one of our middle school sites doing some math work together. And you can't really see, but off to the side there is a coordinator who's working alongside of them. So I really love this because the students are the focus, and you have what we in the Montessori world, I'm an old school Montessori teacher myself, would call the guide on the side. So getting out of the way and letting the students take over in their own learning process is really pivotal. And I just love this picture. They're so into this lesson. I'm going to talk for just a few minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lydia here. We're just going to go through what happens during your mentorship experience. So we understand that we are in uncharted territory together. This is a new program designed to fit a pre-existing need in a virtual space during a pandemic. None of this is old hat for anyone. So the biggest thing that our students really need is support with technology. As I already mentioned, we've had 3 or 4 students not be able to turn their computers on. When they can turn them on, they don't know keyboard shortcuts. They don't always understand how the mouse works on the computer. They may have trouble wayfinding. The school system is using learning management systems. So if they're an MNPS traditional school student, they're going to be in Schoology, which is a learning management system I'm going to show you guys a little bit about today. They may be in a similar program like Canvas if they're in a different school district or in a charter school, public charter or private school. There's this sort of idea that students are participating in 2 ways right now. It's synchronous and asynchronous, right? So they're going to school. Some of the time they have a teacher in front of them, some of the time they don't, but it's all virtual. So if they're meeting with their teacher, they may need to understand how to use Microsoft Teams, like MMPS is using, or understand how to use Zoom. That's something we can help them with. There's also other applications that are being used in the classroom. There's tools for communication, WhatsApp, Remind. They're all kind of getting used teacher to teacher. So one of the things you'll have to do when you meet with the family is figure out what school they're going to. And we may have some unpacking, have to figure out who their teacher is, contact the teacher and see what systems they're using, because everything's different. It's all being executed at a local level this year instead of district down. They tried district down back in April and it just didn't work, right? So they're leaving it up to the teachers to really do more grassroots movements here. And that means we have a lot of work to figure out how they're actually being reached out to. And then we just have this idea of like general digital literacy and norms for the classroom. So how do you use your computer to the fullest ability? Keyboard shortcuts, typing skills, home keys could all be part of what you cover in this space. I'm also going to show you that the district has done, I would say, a really good job of putting some supports out to our students already. So let me move this out of the way here. So there is, if you haven't seen this already, Metro Nashville has put together a back to school homepage. And as part of that, they have this virtual learning parent playbook. And don't worry about memorizing any of the links or anything like that. When you get started with the family, we're going to give you access to a whole booklet of information about these resources. But if you notice, they've created this parent-facing document that we can walk our families through as part of our tech focus. It gives over the priorities, goes over the priorities the district has for the families, and then gives them all sorts of, I love this because it's picture-based, all sorts of resources. If you go to the one that says resources to families, there's information specifically about the help desk, which, by the way, guys, MMPS has a translated hotline. So if they call in and get a translator, they can get help desk support in their native language. There's also information about Schoology and Flipgrid, which the district are using, and resource videos to just help the students out with. They may not have a clue about this, right? So getting them to this website could be a tech focus for the week. Teaching them this hotline number could be a tech focus for the week. They're also offering in-person tech support. So if it's really bad and the family just needs to be in person with somebody, we can get them to one of these locations, even if we have to get the nice van and pick them up and drive them over. I talked with the director of extended learning today, and they are willing to reserve us some space in these tech centers if we schedule ahead of time. So let us know. And if your families are really struggling with their computer, we'll pick them up and take them down to one of these in-person tech support locations. Excuse me. There's also an entire page dedicated to just wayfinding in Schoology. So this is how all of our students are kind of being expected to find their classes, log in every day, go to class, check their grades. It's all there. And it's not an English learner friendly program. We've been going over with Schoology reps some English language learner support systems, but Schoology is really not meant for ELLs. And you can tell that by the fact that the pictures don't match the content necessarily, that the titles and the wayfinding mechanisms can sometimes be lengthy words or can be difficult. There's a lot of what I would say language noise involved in Schoology that we can help cut down for the family. So definitely some opportunities for us to use these resources that are parent facing to our advantage. In addition to the tech focus that we're going to provide our families with, we also have this academic focus. And this is really just the idea that we can step in and help students complete their homework or their classwork, right? We can always offer continued language development. The thing we're really concerned with here is that our students understand the academic vocabulary that they're going to use in their classrooms, and that we can help them with reading, writing, speaking, and listening. I understand that we're not all trained to do this, but you could read with your students even just for 15 minutes a week and it would have an impact. You could have them write about their week. You could have them send you a text message about their week or write on a piece of paper and take a picture of it. And that would have impact. Just talking to you over the phone and practicing phone etiquette, getting them to talk to you in complete sentences, tell a story from start to finish. Those are all really important ways that we can be promoting their academic development. And Lydia is going to talk a little bit more about some ESL specific strategies. The other focus point for this program in particular is basic needs. So we know that our clients are not going to be interested in our services unless we're providing for their most basic needs. So what we would like the mentors to do is when you're meeting with a family, just check in every week and say, do you have enough food? How are you doing on paying rent? Are there any health concerns in the family? Is everybody still gainfully employed? Can we help you with an unemployment application? Do you need help with workforce training or job development? Because those are services that we can offer as an agency. And if we can't meet them ourselves, we know who to refer those clients to. So this is just an opportunity for us to check in with families. You're going to be able to report these kind of basic needs as a checkbox on your mentor reports. And I'll show you guys that at the end. Just a really quick note, if you ever suspect child abuse or neglect, remember that Tennessee is a mandatory reporting state and that you do have an obligation to report any suspected neglect or abuse. If you do not feel comfortable reporting that yourselves, feel free to reach out to us and we can do that report for you. Okay, Lydia, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk us through some best practices for English learners.
Awesome. Hey guys, so my name is Lydia Etheridge. I have been working with Brandon this summer on some of our programs, Reaching Youth. And during the day, I guess, my real big gig is I am an ESL teacher within Nashville. So I'm going to go over some best practices for supporting our English learners. Mr. DJ, if you can move us forward. All right. So English learners, a lot of times people don't really know what to do with them. They kind of freak out. They're like, they don't speak English. What do I do? Even some teachers do that. Being an EL is actually not a big deal, to be, for lack of a better way of putting it. It just means that our students are in the process of learning English, full stop. If you have ever learned a foreign language, you kind of know what that experience is like, but if you only speak English, it is much harder to understand. I kind of just joked, like I called Brandon Mr. DJ, like I'm bilingual, so I get it, but it's not always something people get. And I'm actually gonna give us a video to watch in a minute that'll kind of give you an idea of what day-to-day life is like for these students. But just to come out of the gate here, not everyone understands this, and that's okay. But being an EL is not a disability. It is treated specially within the school system. Students are eligible for special services. However, it is not a disability. And if anything, it is actually a strength. So our students are bilingual or multilingual, sometimes even quadlingual, they know a ton of languages sometimes, and they are just in the process of learning the language of the country they now live in, and trying to keep up in the school system, as Brandon described earlier. That said, our students do often experience attitudes to the contrary, depending on their school environment. A lot of our students that we serve through NICE are in larger EL population schools. Even within those schools, sometimes you have different, less than positive attitudes towards our English learners. So we really want to focus on lifting these kids up. I think for me, that's the biggest part of my job. All children are entitled to a fair and, oh, Brandon, no, do not buy a washing machine right now. Or
I don't know why that happened.
Okay, if you need to do that, I can share my screen instead. It's totally
No. It's not that. It's that the slideshow just closed. Hold on one second.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Is it back now?
Almost. There you go.
Okay.
Nice,
sorry about that.
Nice refrigerator, by the way. Good choice.
No, it's just on in the background. My little presentation view here just shut down. Sorry about that.
Totally fine. We're good. So anyway, all children in the United States are entitled to a fair and equal education in the U.S., regardless of their language or citizenship status. And schools must accommodate the needs of ELs per federal law, which is where teachers like myself come in. So our ELs, they do bring immense cultural resources to their educational experience. Those often go untapped, sometimes due to the nature of the curriculum. So I think Brandon gave an example earlier about Imperial Japan. Our kids may not know about that, but what they might know a lot about is Mexico, if they're from Mexico. And so sometimes we don't always tap into that. And it's something I've even been guilty of as a teacher, is thinking like the kids didn't know anything about a certain topic. And we took, I was a fifth grade teacher last year. We took all of our fifth graders to the Agricultural Museum. And it just never even occurred to me that my kids would like know anything about Tennessee agriculture. But next thing I know, I have like a horde of children around me being like, Mies, cows. I know cows, Guatemala. And I'm like, that's awesome. You know about cows. Like, you know, so it's really cool. They do know a lot. It's just sometimes helping them to connect that, but also understanding there may be gaps just because they did have a different educational experience, you know, that sort of thing. So it's kind of all over the place, but try to assume they know more than you think they do. Some of our students do not have a lot of intrinsic motivation to learn English, but many of them do. It is worth asking to kind of see where kids are at. You know, a lot of kids, I've been very touched. They tell me they want to learn English to help their parents, you know, or to do well in school or to have a better life. You know, some kids, they don't care about learning English. It's just kind of something that got thrust on them. It's a little different than our adult learners, but there are a lot of really motivated students within the EL population. And unfortunately, they're not always recognized as such. Many students, including many students not in SIFE, which is the program Brandon mentioned earlier that helps address the needs of learners who have interrupted education. They do have interrupted or limited formal education prior to coming to the US. It's kind of a long story, but sometimes they do get routed into the regular school system. Regardless, school under normal circumstances is a huge adjustment for new Americans. And especially at the age these kids are coming into the school system. Every student is unique. ELs are not all the same, just making sure we're clear about that. And all students, including and especially ELs, are capable of higher level thinking. I oftentimes find even within EL teachers, they don't always recognize that. However, language is a medium. It is not indicative of your ability to think on a higher level. So even students with limited English can do that. Sometimes we do have to get creative though to work around the language barrier. And I'll talk about some of the strategies we use in just a second. We can go forward, Brandon. Awesome. All right, so we're about to watch a video that kind of shows you what the school experience is like for our English learners. I've given you a lot of the really positive details about English learners, but there's some pretty sad stuff too. So while all of those amazing things are true, it's also true that only around 2/3 of active English learners graduate high school. So the work you are doing is important. Despite laws requiring accommodation, too many English learners do actually experience what we call submersion, which is exactly what it sounds like. They're put under, you know, ridiculous levels of stress. If you are someone who's learned another language and like actually been in the other country for a full day, you know, not talking to anyone who speaks your language, you know that you have a horrible headache at the end of the day. And it's, you know, it's like that, but even worse for some of our English learners. They don't, you know, always know what's going on in their classrooms, and it's pretty heartbreaking. Finally, our recent immigrants face different challenges than students who have been in the US since early elementary school or are born in the US. Some English learners, that is their story. They, you know, were born in America or, you know, moved here before the age of 4 or 5. For our kids who've just arrived, it is just very different for a lot of the reasons we've already talked about. So Brandon, if you want to cue up our video, I love this video. It's a little older, but this is my cat, by the way, Brittany. It's a little older, but it really really shows what our students experience. It's a lot. So I'd like you to.
Just before we jump in here, just to give you guys a little more localized data from what Lydia's sharing, up until last year, no students from the SIFE program at MPS had ever graduated. Last year was the first graduation, and I think they graduated 4 students. And you have to remember, we serve over 100 every year. So our SIFE graduation rates are nominally 0 in this area. But nationwide, it's something like 90% of SIFE students don't graduate. So this is a huge opportunity you have to make a difference in that population.
Brandon, can you click out the ad because it's going to cut off the subtitles?
What's that, Lydia? Sorry.
Sorry, there's like an ad for Babbel. It's covering the subtitles.
Oh, sorry. Let me.
Oh, it's all good. Dumb YouTube.
We're going to take notes from the story, and we're going to turn it into a math problem, and we're going to work through it together, okay? Three graphs. So I'm going to write 3 graphs. How long did it take them to write 3 graphs? The 3 graphs in 6 minutes. How long will it take them to run 20 graphs? What do we do? How many minutes is that per graph? 8 minutes. It's not 8 minutes. Michelle. 18 minutes? Nope, not 18 minutes. Yes, I made that. 40? 40, oh my God. How'd you get 40? You don't know? Well, 40's the right answer. How did you get it? I forgot. Okay. Does anyone know how we got 40? Yes, what it says. Yep, that's right. Very good. Great. Can you tell us how you got that? 40? Yep, very good. But can you explain to us what you did here? How you got that? Joe? Do you want to use your recess? No. Okay then. Thank you, Lisa. to take a walk with me? I don't want you to worry about the test, okay, Mrs.? Sí, está preocupada, just try your best, okay? Do you understand? Sí, esto es importante. You're right, Moises, it is important. I have to go. I'm sorry. Used to be in French, right?
Yes, I used to be. Muy bien, perfectamente.
Let me translate it. Just the math part. I just one student Moises, and he went totally ASAP.
We can't. We're not supposed to talk to the kids in Spanish, technically. It's kind of like Moises. He's a good kid. We need to focus on the kids that are, let's say, Spanish. He's very
Close to being proficient.
right. It's a 1% proficiency this year. If we don't do any better this year, I don't know what's going to happen. So just let's make sure that Michelle follows it. Okay? I have to. Sorry, excuse me.
Ayun, kung saan ito pala sa
Come on. ¿Ya sabes esto? ¿Qué? Órale.
Anyways, some trash.
Tranquilo, sí. Mira, carnal, ese güey es un tonto. Debería estar estudiando como tú. Te aseguro que ahora en el examen no vas a ver ni siquiera la mitad de la matemática que tú sabes. ¿Ok? Pero
¿Qué cosa? El examen. ¿Qué queremos casar? ¿Por qué no acompañarnos? ¿Cómo vas a hacer? No, yo te lo baño. Porque mi mamá está ahí. No voy. Yo ya pasé a mi hija y yo no entiendo el examen. ¿Quieres? Pues cuando hablo en inglés, como tú y yo. Cuando dijo eso, cuando estaba hablando en el teléfono gigante, pero no está hablando contigo. Sí, pero escucha. Ay, ¿cómo le vas a hacer el examen? No tengo suficiente dinero para un solo día. Bien. I'm trying to find a test in Spanish for one of my kids. I know we used to have them. I thought they'd be down here for bilingual stuff. Lo siento, yo no me leo. Necesito llegar al examen. ¿Por qué se lo vas a pagar? Yo no sé.
Moisés, ¿qué hacemos ahora?
I'm sorry, Moisés. I have to take this from you, okay? But if you have any questions, you can ask me. Miss Peterson?
All right. So, just to kind of like pull it all together, why we just watched that. And if you have like a lot of emotion, like I totally get it. If you need to step away, it's not my first time seeing it, but the first time I did, I cried a lot. But basically, like the reason I wanted you to see that was just to understand the language struggles and language barriers our children are navigating on a daily basis in the US school system. Some of the negative and unkind attitudes toward ELs that they encounter, teachers who are unequipped to help ELs, you know, even though they maybe have good intentions, unfortunately, some teachers don't. I'm just going to be real with you, but most do. There's a lot of pressure to perform in our data-driven school systems that we have today. And also one just interesting fact, English learners actually take more standardized tests than any other children in the entire US school system. And finally, students are dealing with trauma that takes away from their ability to engage fully in the school day. So, all right, we can keep rolling on with some ways that you can help our students. All right, so get to know your students and their needs and preferences. Every student is unique, as we've already covered. Every student has something different they're dealing with. However, there's some basic things that we can do to help. Visuals go a long way. And what that could look like in our current virtual environment is if they ask you what something is, showing them a picture, like looking it up on your phone and being like, here it is, or sending it to them, however you're communicating with them. It's actually super easy to do visuals right now. Talk with your hands. Actually, you just saw me do it. Talk with your hands. I talk a lot with my hands when I'm working with English learners, and it's something that can really help when we provide that little bit of support, especially in terms of using common signals. We can get into that more if anyone wants it, but I'm going to keep moving, but feel free to, you know, let me know. All right, sentence frames. Those can help to lift the cognitive load, and that would be primarily for writing. I'll get into that in just a second, how to take that. But essentially, what we want to do is lift the amount of language that our students are having to produce in hopes that that will help them to be able to focus on the task. Because as you saw with Moises, he was great at math, but he was struggling to express how he was doing the math and things like that. Many of our students do benefit from help with spelling a word they know to say, but not how to write. That's really real. So a lot of students, they do learn to speak quicker than they learn any of the other language domains. And I actually personally have had that happen. There were things that for a long time I knew how to say in French. I couldn't have spelled them. So that is a real thing. Foster a safe partner environment. You don't want your students to be afraid of you. I think that kind of goes without saying, but like, you know, you're there to be their friend and their ally in this. Model correct English. One of the really great things and simple things to do, and if you have kids, you may have done this, is it's what's called recasting. So if a child says glass be clear or something like that, like they see something pretty close, you can say, yeah, the glass is clear. So it's basically where you repeat something back to a student. It's a super gentle way to correct them. They do start to learn. It does work, I promise. Without being like, no, B is wrong. You know, don't do that. And finally, don't overload your learners. Go slow, master the art of waiting. That's something that all teachers struggle with, regardless of if they're working with English learners. Silence is okay. Sometimes it just takes a minute to process. What I do, I'll tell you my super secret tip. I count to 10 in my head after I ask a question before I even think about saying anything else, because I realize it takes time to process what you just heard. All right, can we keep going forward, Brandon? Awesome. All right, so I did provide also some more specific tips for when a student has a reading assignment, or actually really any assignment that involves reading, which is all of the assignments. So one of the really big things that our ELs benefit from is read aloud. So having a text being read aloud to them. As I mentioned a second ago, our students, they progress quicker in writing and speaking, or sorry, listening and speaking than they do necessarily in writing or reading. So that can be a really big help to our students. Use the text. So when students get stuck on a certain phrase, you can ask guiding questions that might open up their understanding. This one's a little bit harder to understand, so I have an example here. So when a student does not know a word like malicious, ask the word in the larger context of the text. So what do we know about the character being described as malicious? Is she a nice person or a mean person? So what could the word malicious mean? You know, so there's a way to guide it there without being like malicious means bad and just keeping moving on. We want to engage them in that thought process. They deserve that, to be their best selves and their best learning little scholarly selves. So context clues. You know this one, your ELs probably do too. In fact, English learners tend to have a strength in this area compared to native English speakers. But helping students to focus on the words around a word they may not know can help them understand the meaning. Language buds. So do you use the same language as your mentee? If you do know a foreign language, don't be afraid to use it to help the student. Even if you just know like a little Spanish or something, whip it out, try it. If you guys both speak Spanish. You don't necessarily want to overuse the other language. So if you are fluent, you know, use it as a tool, not a crutch. That's always my advice. You can also skip over something. If a word is unfamiliar and you know it's not important, don't belabor the point. Keep trucking. And finally, when all else fails, something that can really benefit English learners is to simplify the language or paraphrase something. So if the instructor is given extremely flowery language telling them what to do, and it's just saying write a paragraph, say write a paragraph. That's okay. All right, keep moving. All right, finally, writing tips. So know your students' capabilities. And maybe I should have addressed this a little earlier actually, but achieving academic proficiency in English is a roughly 7-year process, which is a reality our educational system is not prepared to accommodate. basically, here's like a simple guide to the stages of language acquisition. Between their in their first year in the US, first of all, a lot of students, they're silent, they don't talk. Once they start to talk, they give single word answers, very basic sentences. Frequent spelling and mechanical errors are totally normal. At that 1 to 2 year mark, they can write a few basic related sentences, and the spelling and mechanical errors remain frequent. At 2 to 3 years, they can write a simple paragraph. Language use is clearly not native, but it is readable with a lot of errors. 3 to 4, we're up to like a simple essay, pretty independently, some fancy language. 4 to 5 years, they're essentially proficient. This is assuming, correct, proper instruction. This is assuming there are no, learning disabilities going on or learning differences. You can make up a word bank to help a student with completing an answer. So if they're having trouble, come up with a few options. They can be wrong, see if you can help them through that process. And finally, sentence frames are basically like creating a fill in the blank for your students, but that's what I was talking about a second ago about kind of lifting that cognitive load. You're basically answering the first part of the question for them. So if my question was, what color is Brandon's hair? Which is obviously not an academic question, but the answer is Brandon's hair is blank, so that kind of gives them not having to take that extra step of how do I even answer that, so they can focus on, oh, I know his hair is, so that helps with that. I hope that's been helpful. We are about to lead into some breakout groups. And Brandon and I are happy to answer any questions you have about anything I just presented. I know that was a lot, but we're also going to be reflecting on, based on what you've heard so far, what makes a successful mentor? What are some ideas you have to implement our scope of services? And what additional resources you would like to have before being assigned to a family? So Brandon's going to send us into those breakouts in just a second.
To any of the families you'll be serving, but could be, that they'll be more willing to open up, for sure. Great question. With that in mind, I'm just going to go ahead and run through the next couple of slides just about next steps and try to get us out of here as quickly as possible, because I know it's getting kind of late. But I do have just a few things for you guys. So being a mentor, we do have some expectations of you all. The first is that you participate for an entire semester, so a 9-week period. Now, we understand not all of these families have been identified, so if you come in and you don't get matched with a family for the first couple of weeks while we're trying to find someone, we may have some other work that you can be doing in the meantime, but that might start the clock on your 9 weeks. We understand that. If you're willing to stick around for longer and be here for the entire fall semester, that would be huge, but we understand not everybody can commit to that. The mentorship program itself is 2 hours a week meeting with the family. So that could be a phone call, it could be a Zoom session. For those of you who are interested, you could do a home visit, but again, we're not requiring home visits. A lot of families are very open to the idea of a home visit, so it would be the volunteers' comfort level there. And again, we have your best interest in mind, so that is not a requirement at this time, and we don't foresee it being a requirement in the future. We do ask that you log your hours and track it forward. I believe everybody here saw us do that during the volunteer orientation, but if you need help with that, reach out to Hannah Mwansa, the mentorship coordinator, and she will help you get your hours logged. We also have mentor reports, which I'm going to go over really quickly here in just a second, that we expect you to fill out and submit electronically. I've tried to make them as painless as possible. It's just a chance for us to be able to use you all in the creation of case notes that go to the federal government, so we can show what we're doing and highlight success stories with our clients. We also expect some degree of consistent communication about the needs of the family and the student. So if you recognize that the child is showing up every week with the same outfit on, and it doesn't look like they've been able to take a shower recently or something like that, and you can tell there's some additional outstanding needs, and they're not opening up to you about it, let the mentorship coordinator know, let Hannah know, because we can dig a little deeper with that family, meet with them in person, find out what's going on, come up with solutions to those kinds of things. We also have ongoing trainings that will be available. So the longer you stay with NICE, the more often you are to get further training, which also just means that you're going to get to be better at this volunteering opportunity and understand this community deeper, which is a huge, huge positive. We also hope that you'll stay flexible. Like I said, this is a pilot. It's something we haven't done before. Other agencies are trying this in real time as well, and we almost have to build it to scale. So it's going to be kind of a difficult process getting our feet on the ground, figuring out how to do virtual mentorship. We do have just a few policies and procedures. I'm going to send this out to you guys later. The thing that I really want to make sure everybody understands is that if you meet with a student in person, you will have to do a fingerprint background check. That is the school system's rule, not ours. But if you're only meeting with your family virtually, that form we had you fill out in Fowler's is going to be just fine. I will also tell you that the schedule follows the school system. So if there's a break in school, we can also take the week off for mentorship. You're not expected to be with your family if you're a student and you're out of school, or if the actual student you're serving doesn't have classes. You are not on call. You are not a 24/7 hour operator for these families. They will get used to you being a support system, and it's important to set good, healthy boundaries with the family and say, these are the hours that I'm available. If you need anything, reach out in these times. Doing that is going to really help you not become overwhelmed. There's a term in mental health services called the trauma of transference. It's very easy to take on the pre-existing trauma of these families by sort of over-serving their needs. And it's very important to set boundaries for yourself to practice good self-care. I'll also let you know that when you get your background check filled out and your assignment, you will have an additional training. It's really short. It's just something that it's a PowerPoint you go through and sign, just saying that you're not going to share any kind of health or personal academic information of the client outside of to a staff member who's involved in the programs. That's our HIPAA and FERPA forms. And then there is a liability waiver that we ask you to sign just to do volunteering in general. So we'll send those things out at the same time. And the last thing that I'm going to show you is the mentor reports. So this mentor report is just really simple. It's a Google form that I've created. If you have suggestions for making it easier on you all, let me know, because we just want this to be as simple as possible. We would like you to complete one for every week that you serve the student. So if you go for 2 one-hour sessions and that's how you meet your 2 hours, that's fine. You would just submit one report for the whole week, identifying what you were able to do with the family. You could even break it further into smaller chunks or try to do 1 2-hour session a week with the family. You might even decide to schedule that when they're having that asynchronous class time. So it's during the school day, but they don't have a teacher in front of them. The only thing we're going to require of the mentorship program is that we be helping them with their homework, that we be helping them with their schoolwork. That's the only thing we really expect. Those other things like the tech support, the learner motivation support, those are recommendations, and we'll have weekly guidelines for you on activities you could do. It's really there to help structure your experience if you want to take advantage of that. But if you feel confident that you're going to form a strong, lasting relationship with the family and be able to help them with their schoolwork, that is our biggest thing that we want to accomplish here. And then again, these mentor reports get submitted to Hannah Mwansa, who will be the coordinator of the program, matching you with families. I am going to switch over my share here for just a second. This is the actual document that you'll be reporting on. So first it will ask you to provide an email address. You'll select your mentee. So in this example, Mr. Miyagi is submitting a mentor report for his mentee, Daniel LaRusso. Okay. So describe any tech activities you completed this week. If none, mark an A. Top Proctor technique for washing a car. Great. Briefly describe any activities that support learner motivation. If none, mark no. So worked on personal goals and sense of internal motivation. Just an example for what you could say. One of the most basic ways this could be accomplished is just helping students establish a schedule for themselves and set up alarms on a phone or device or even an alarm clock that help them stay true to that schedule. It could also be identifying their goals and just working from those goals backwards to show how their progress is moving them forward. Briefly describe activities that promote academic success. So these are our big focuses, and we're just having you guys list out what you're able to accomplish. And then at the bottom here, my family needs support with the following resources. So you're just going to click, it's a checkbox in the form, which of the following they might need support in. So you've got the families asked for help filling out a food stamp application. TANF, which is support for needy families. They'll know what it is if they want support in helping with it, right? If it is an income issue or an issue of feeding the family and you refer it back to HANA and they qualify for one of these, we'll get them in the program regardless. But sometimes clients will say, I've got this SNAP application, I don't know how to fill it out, can you help me? Same thing happens with healthcare and unemployment insurance. If they can't make rent or they need cash assistance, we have funding both from United Way and the Governor's CARE Act. I think it's something like $500,000 total now, where we can actually cut checks to qualifying families. So if they're having trouble paying bills or they've been negatively affected by the pandemic, let us know because we might be able to actually help them financially. Workforce training. So our adult education classes are sponsored by the Labor and Workforce Development Department here in Tennessee, and we actually have integrated education and training programs, which is where we actually teach hard skills in a vocation to help get people back to work. So if they're out of work and they want English language support that's catered towards the work environment, we can help with that. Other things that you might encounter would be like internet and phone service, if they come up with something. So this option was other, and I just put in counseling services because maybe you think there's a mental health need where the family's being particularly triggered by, we call it complex trauma. In this circumstance, where the pandemic is triggering pre-existing traumas in complex ways, you might decide, oh, I want to get them to talk with a counselor. We can help that referral as well. So this is the basic form. Again, it'll show up like this, check boxes and short answer questions. Once you send it, it automatically will go to Hannah, who will review it. If you forget to submit it, she's going to be the one poking you about it. So that is the reporting process. Very last slide here. Once you have your availability form and your application filled out, once you have your background check, we will send you that HIPAA form and the liability waiver. Once those things get sent back to us, we'll match you with a student. Now, again, guys, I can't stress enough. We've got 3 or 4 people working on this, but we are just now getting families interested in this program. So it might take us a few days, even a week, to get you paired with the right family once all these steps are taken. But like I said, we've got 4 staff members devoting their entire energy to this so we can really start to make a difference in these families' lives. At that point, you'll get to begin your mentorship. So there's our presentation. I know it was a lot of information for you guys, and I'm sure that we don't have all the answers. But I do just want to ask if there's any general questions before we wrap up. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to talk with each of you. I look forward to having you be a part of the department. It is because of your effort and energy as volunteers that we can do programs like this, because we would not have a way to reach these families otherwise. And I cannot cannot stress enough that anything we're able to accomplish is more than what we were doing before. So this is a huge step forward for these families you'll be serving, and I cannot wait to get you guys connected. If you do have follow-up questions, you can email the volunteer email account, or you can email me directly. Again, my name is Brandon White. I'm going to drop my email in the chat here just so everybody has it. But just so you know, the convention at NICE is always first name and then the @empower.org. So mine is Brandon @empower.org. And Hannah, whose full name, by the way, is Hannah too, is Hannah @empowernashville.org. And so we will be connecting you guys next with Hannah, who will be assigning you your families. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either of us. It has been an absolute pleasure to get to talk with you all. Everybody have a great evening, and we will send this presentation out afterwards just so you have the information. Have a good night, everybody.